The galaxy had long feared the Council. Its fleets, with their advanced technology and relentless forces, had crushed every resistance that stood against them. For centuries, they ruled, spreading their influence across countless star systems, dominating and controlling. The humans, once thought to be insignificant, had somehow survived. But as the war stretched on, it became clear that their survival was slipping away. One by one, the planets that once stood strong against the Council fell. The last remnants of humanity had been pushed to the brink, trapped on Earth, with no hope of escape. But the Council's confidence was misplaced. They had underestimated the human spirit, a force more powerful than any fleet or weapon they could muster. As their massive warships hovered above Earth's orbit, the humans were preparing for what they believed would be their final stand. But what the Council didn't know was that humanity wasn't giving up. They had one last card to play, a card that would change everything. Inside the command center of the human resistance, Commander Rachel Shaw paced back and forth, her eyes focused on the star map displayed in front of her. The enemy fleet had already deployed its forces around Earth, their massive ships ready to bombard the planet into submission. There was no turning back. The humans had fought for years, but now they were on the verge of extinction. Rachel's fingers tightened into fists as she stared at the map. It was over, or so the Council thought. "Commander, we've received the signal." Lieutenant Sarah Klein's voice broke through the tension, bringing Rachel's attention back to the present. "The envoy is ready." Rachel didn't need to ask who Sarah meant. She knew. The human soldier. The one who had disappeared years ago after humanity's last great defeat. No one knew how he had survived, or what he had discovered, but rumors had swirled about his return. Some had thought he was a myth. But now, as the enemy closed in on Earth, the myth was about to become a reality. Sarah didn't wait for permission. She hit a series of buttons on her console, and a holographic image of a lone figure appeared in the center of the room. His face was obscured by a helmet, but there was no mistaking the presence he exuded. This man, this soldier, was humanity's last hope. Eric Steele. The image of the soldier flickered briefly before his voice echoed throughout the command center. "I'm ready. The weapon is prepared." Rachel's breath caught in her throat. The weapon. The ancient unknown force that Eric had found during his travels. It was something the humans barely understood, a technology so powerful it could level entire planets. Eric had been preparing it for years, perfecting it, even though its true capabilities were still a mystery. But if there was ever a time to use it, it was now. "Do you have control over it?" Rachel asked, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "I do," Eric replied, his tone calm and confident. "But it's unpredictable. It will respond to my will, but we need to be careful. I can't guarantee how it will react." "Just do it," Rachel said, her voice firm. She didn't have time for doubts. The fate of humanity rested on this moment. "Activate it. Now." Eric's figure disappeared from the hologram, and the room fell into an eerie silence. Outside the command center, on Earth's surface, the final remnants of the human fleet prepared for battle. The Council's forces were already descending, their weapons primed for destruction. They believed they had won, that nothing could stop them now. But they hadn't accounted for one thing: the human will to survive. Eric had spent years in the depths of space, searching, learning, and finding the secrets of ancient civilizations long forgotten. He had uncovered the weapon, a force so powerful that the mere hint of its existence had caused the galaxy to tremble. Now, with it in his hands, he was humanity's last hope. The ground beneath Eric's feet shook as the weapon powered up, sending a pulse of energy into the atmosphere. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the skies above Earth erupted in a brilliant flash of light. The Council's fleet froze, their sensors overwhelmed by the intensity of the blast. "Report." Rachel's voice was sharp as she demanded an update. "Commander," Sarah's voice trembled with awe. "The energy surge, it's unlike anything we've ever seen. The hologram flickered again, and Eric's voice came through, strained but determined. "I've unleashed it. The weapon is responding. Brace yourselves." The flash of light from the weapon spread out in all directions, creating a massive shockwave that rippled through the space surrounding Earth. The Council ships, caught off guard, scrambled to adjust, their systems failing under the sheer power of the blast. Some ships were disabled completely, their energy shields collapsing as the shockwave passed through them. Others, caught in the epicenter of the explosion, were torn apart, their hulking forms shattered by the immense force. For the first time in years, the human forces saw something they hadn't dared to hope for: victory. The Council was in disarray. Their ships were retreating, unable to withstand the onslaught of the weapon's energy. The soldiers on Earth's surface, watching from the distant battlefield, couldn't believe their eyes. The enemy was retreating, not advancing. But just as quickly as it had appeared, the weapon's power began to fade. Eric's voice came through again, weaker this time. "I can't hold it much longer. You need to act quickly, Commander." Rachel's heart raced as she processed the information. The weapon had done its job, but it was clear that it couldn't be sustained for much longer. Eric was pushing it to its limits, and it was beginning to take its toll on him. "Hold on, Eric. We're coming for you," Rachel said, her voice tight with urgency. As the enemy fleet regrouped, retreating to a safe distance, the remaining human forces moved forward. The Council had underestimated humanity's resilience, but now they knew better. The battle was far from over, but for the first time in years, there was hope. Eric had proven that humans were not easily defeated, and while the Council thought they had won, humanity had just begun to fight back. The war was not over yet. The battle had just begun, and the weight of humanity's last stand was felt in every corner of the galaxy. On Earth, the skies still smoldered from the devastating pulse of energy unleashed by Eric Steele and his mysterious weapon. Though the Council's fleet had retreated, they had only temporarily lost their advantage. The enemy wasn't one to accept defeat so easily. They would come again, stronger and more prepared, and humanity had no time to waste. Inside the command center, Commander Rachel Shaw stood motionless, staring at the holographic projections of the enemy fleet retreating. It was a moment of rare victory, but she knew it wouldn't last long. The weapon, as powerful as it was, had only bought them time, not a permanent solution. Eric's voice crackled through the comms, still carrying a faint trace of strain. "The weapon, it's alive, Rachel. It responds to me, but not just through my commands. It's more than I thought. It's sentient." Rachel's heart skipped a beat. A sentient weapon. The implications were enormous. This wasn't just a machine or a tool. It was something alive, something that could think, adapt, and possibly evolve. "What do you mean, alive?" Rachel asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Is it under your control?" "For now," Eric responded, his voice tight. "But there's more to it. I'm not sure how it works, but it's reacting to my emotions, my thoughts. I need time to understand it. It's powerful, but it's unpredictable." Rachel closed her eyes for a moment, letting the weight of his words sink in. They had no time. The Council was regrouping. If they didn't find a way to harness the weapon's full potential, they would lose the advantage. "We can't afford mistakes, Eric. We need to know everything about it. And we need to know now," she said, her voice sharp, each word cutting through the tension in the room. "The Council won't be fooled for long. They'll send everything they've got." There was a pause on the other end, and when Eric spoke again, his voice carried a note of concern. "I'm trying, Rachel. But the weapon, it's changing. It's getting stronger, more aware, and I think it's starting to form its own will." Rachel clenched her fists. This was beyond anything they had expected. The weapon was no longer just a tool. It had become an unpredictable force that could either be humanity's salvation or its doom. They had no idea how to control it, or worse, if they even could. Outside, the stars seemed to burn with an intensity that matched the anxiety coursing through Rachel's veins. The human fleet, small and outmatched, was still gathering. The last of their ships, patched together from the wreckage of past battles, were racing toward Earth, hoping to form a united front before the Council made its move. But the odds were still against them. The silence in the command center was broken by the sudden blare of alarms. Rachel's heart raced as the alert system blared across the room. "Commander, enemy fleet inbound," Sarah Klein called out, her voice filled with urgency. "They're coming in hot, faster than we expected. And they're bringing reinforcements." Rachel's mind raced. "How many ships?" "Too many," Sarah replied grimly. "At least 5 times the size of the fleet we fought before. They've called for backup from the outer rim." Rachel turned to the holographic map, her mind working rapidly to assess their options. The weapon was their last hope, but how long would it hold? How long could Eric keep it under control before it overwhelmed him? The questions gnawed at her, but there was no time for doubt. "Prepare the fleet," Rachel ordered. "We won't give them a chance to regroup. We'll strike before they're fully set." "But Commander," Sarah said hesitantly, "we don't even know the full capabilities of the weapon. If we engage the Council now and it fails..." Rachel met her lieutenant's gaze, her expression hardening. "If we don't fight now, we'll lose everything. We're going in." The human fleet, what was left of it, moved into position, its makeshift ships forming a rough defensive line. They may have been outmatched, but they had one thing the Council didn't: desperation. And that, in many ways, made them more dangerous. In the center of the command ship, Eric stood by the weapon's control panel, his hand resting lightly on the device that had brought them to this point. It pulsed with a low, rhythmic energy, almost as if it were alive, breathing with the ship. Eric could feel it, its awareness, its hunger. It was waiting for his command, yet somehow it seemed to be aware of more than just his thoughts. It sensed his emotions, his fear, his hope. The weapon was responding to them all. "What do you need from me, Eric?" Rachel's voice crackled in his earpiece, her words filled with urgency. She had to be ready to act, and time was running out. "We're about to engage. I don't know how long I can hold it, Rachel," Eric replied, his voice strained. "This thing, it's powerful, but it's not like anything we've ever seen. I need you to promise me something." "What?" Rachel asked, though her gut told her it was something she wouldn't want to hear. "If I lose control, if this thing gets out of hand, I need you to shut it down, no matter the cost." Rachel's heart sank. She didn't want to think about that. If Eric couldn't control the weapon, it could destroy them all. It was a weapon of unimaginable power, but it was also unpredictable. If it responded to Eric's emotions, what would happen if those emotions turned desperate or angry? "I'll do what I have to," she said, her voice quiet but resolute. "We're not losing this fight." Eric didn't answer. He just focused on the weapon, silently preparing himself for what was to come. The fleet moved into position, the hum of their engines vibrating through the hulls of their ships. The enemy was almost upon them. The stars outside were just pinpricks of light, lost in the vastness of the dark expanse. Rachel's breath caught in her throat as she watched the Council's ships approach, each one a towering, menacing presence, ready to obliterate everything in its path. And then, as the enemy ships locked their sights on Earth, the weapon activated. Eric's hand slammed against the console, sending a surge of energy coursing through the system. The weapon responded instantly, releasing an explosive pulse of energy that sent shockwaves through space. The Council's ships were blasted back, their shields disintegrating under the sheer force of the weapon's power. But the surge wasn't over. The weapon's energy continued to spread, twisting and turning, forming a powerful vortex that surrounded the human fleet. "What the hell is happening?" Sarah screamed from the control center as the walls shook from the pressure. The weapon was no longer responding to Eric alone. It had its own will now. It had awakened, and it was choosing its own course of action. The human fleet was thrown into disarray as the weapon's energy continued to expand outward, its energy field protecting them from the Council's incoming fire. But the question remained, could they control it? Would it destroy everything, or could they finally turn the tide? As Eric stood at the helm of the weapon, his hands shaking, he knew the battle for humanity's survival had just begun. But this wasn't just a battle for Earth. This was a fight for the galaxy itself, and they had no idea where it would take them next. The universe had never seen anything like it. When the weapon's energy surged through space, it was as if the very fabric of reality had been torn apart. The Council's fleet was thrown into chaos, their ships disabled, their weapons useless against the overwhelming force of the human weapon. For a moment, it seemed as though the tides of war had shifted in humanity's favor. The weapon, once thought to be a myth, had proven to be an unmatchable force. But that victory was fragile, and the cost of its power was becoming more apparent with each passing moment. Back in the command center, Commander Rachel Shaw stood frozen, her eyes locked on the holographic display of the battlefield. The enemy ships, battered and retreating, still had the numbers and firepower to crush the human fleet. It was only a matter of time before they regrouped. The humans had bought themselves a little space, but the question was, what would they do with it? "Commander, the weapon's energy field is expanding," Sarah Klein reported, her voice tense. "It's growing stronger by the minute. It's blocking the enemy's fire, but if we don't do something, we won't have enough power to sustain it for long." Rachel's heart raced. The weapon had proven its worth, but its power was unpredictable. They couldn't rely on it forever. Not unless they figured out how to control it, how to harness its energy without destroying everything around them. "Eric, do you copy?" Rachel's voice crackled over the comms. "I copy," came the strained reply from Eric Steele. "But the weapon, it's more than I thought. It's evolving. It's not just reacting to my thoughts anymore. It's like it's becoming its own entity." Rachel clenched her jaw. This was worse than she imagined. The weapon, once a tool to save humanity, was starting to act on its own, and she didn't know if they could trust it anymore. "Can you control it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm trying," Eric responded, frustration evident in his voice. "But it's responding to something else now, something beyond my understanding. It's like it's sensing everything. The weapon is alive, Rachel. It's becoming more than just power." The weight of his words hit Rachel hard. The weapon had been their last hope, but now, it seemed as though it was something far more dangerous. Could they afford to let it continue to evolve? Would it eventually turn on them? "We need a plan," Rachel said, more to herself than to anyone else. "We can't keep relying on it blindly." Sarah's voice interrupted her thoughts. "Commander, the Council isn't done. They've already sent out a distress signal to their allies in the outer systems. If we don't strike soon, we'll be outnumbered again. They're bringing in reinforcements, bigger, more powerful ships." The realization hit Rachel like a punch to the gut. The Council had always been 10 steps ahead. And now, with the weapon's unpredictable nature, they might just have what they needed to finish humanity off once and for all. But if they didn't act fast, they would be crushed. "How long do we have before their reinforcements arrive?" Rachel asked, turning to face Sarah. "Less than an hour," Sarah replied. "We need to move now, or we'll be surrounded." Rachel's mind raced. The weapon was their greatest asset, but it was also their greatest risk. If they could control it, it could give them a chance to win. But if they couldn't, there would be no hope. They were gambling everything on something they didn't fully understand. "Eric, we need you to figure this out," Rachel ordered, her voice filled with authority. "You've got to find a way to control the weapon before it gets out of hand." "I'm on it, but I can't promise anything," Eric replied, his voice full of doubt. "This thing, it's not just a weapon. It's something else." Rachel didn't have time for hesitation. She turned back to the map, studying the enemy's movements as they regrouped. The Council would be coming for them soon, and they would come with everything they had. This was their last chance to push back. "We attack now," Rachel said, her voice cutting through the tension in the room. "Prepare the fleet." The human fleet, though small and outgunned, had fought with the fury of those who had nothing left to lose. They weren't going to let the Council win, not when they had come this far. Eric, standing in the heart of the weapon's power, couldn't shake the feeling that they were all walking a fine line. The weapon's power surged again, and this time it felt different, stronger, more alive. He had never felt so connected to it, and yet the connection terrified him. It was as if it was feeding off his fear, his determination, and something else, something deeper. He could hear it now, the faint whisper in the back of his mind, growing louder with each passing second. The weapon was speaking to him, not with words, but with emotions, with intent. It wasn't just a force, it was something more. "What do you want?" Eric whispered under his breath, the question escaping his lips before he could stop it. The weapon pulsed, its energy vibrating through his body. It was as if it had heard him. It responded with a surge of power that knocked him back, throwing him to the ground. For a moment, everything went black. Then, as his vision cleared, Eric felt a strange calm wash over him. The weapon had shown him something. A vision of the galaxy, of the Council's fleet, but also of something else, something beyond the immediate battle. It was like a glimpse into the future, a warning. The weapon was more than just a tool of war, it was a tool of change. But change came at a cost. Eric shook his head, trying to clear the confusion. He didn't have time for visions. The enemy was coming. "Eric, what's going on?" Rachel's voice came through the comms, sharp with worry. I saw something," Eric replied slowly, pushing himself to his feet. "The weapon, it's showing me something. I don't think we're just fighting for Earth anymore. This is bigger than that." "What do you mean?" Rachel asked. "I think the weapon knows what we need to do. But it's not just about winning this battle. It's about taking control of the galaxy. And it's willing to do whatever it takes to make that happen." Rachel's heart skipped a beat. The stakes had just been raised. "Then we have no choice but to fight. We'll take whatever it gives us, and we'll use it to win," she said, her voice resolute. The human fleet moved into position, the weapon pulsing with energy at the heart of their forces. Eric knew that the Council would be back soon. And this time, they wouldn't be taking prisoners. The weapon's power was unpredictable, but it was their only chance. As the enemy fleet moved closer, Eric stood at the helm of the weapon, knowing that the next few moments would decide everything. If the weapon could truly evolve into something more than a tool of destruction, it might just be humanity's salvation. But if it turned on them, if it decided that humanity was no longer its ally, then everything they fought for would be lost. The fear was spreading, not just throughout the galaxy, but within the human forces themselves. The weapon had awakened, and now no one knew what it would do next. The stars outside the window of the command ship flickered like tiny pinpricks in the vastness of space. They had been human symbols of hope, but now they seemed to mock them. The universe was out of their reach, and the galaxy's fate hung in the balance. The weapon pulsed at the center of their fleet, its energy dark and powerful, alive in a way that sent chills down Eric Steele's spine. The threat of the Council's forces closing in was imminent. The reinforcements were coming faster than expected, and Rachel Shaw knew their time was running out. The fragile peace they had fought for, bought by the human weapon, was about to be shattered. Eric stood before the console, his fingers hovering over the controls, sweat beading on his forehead. He could feel the weapon's power course through him, an unrelenting force that burned at the edges of his consciousness. The whispers, the urges, the unspoken commands, it was like the weapon was beginning to speak to him, not just in terms of energy, but in something deeper, more instinctual. He knew this was dangerous. The longer he interacted with it, the more control it seemed to have over him. And yet, they had no choice but to use it. Humanity had nowhere else to turn. "Eric," Rachel's voice came through the comms, clear but filled with urgency. The enemy's fleet is nearly here. We need you to activate the weapon. We need a decisive blow before they overwhelm us." "I'm trying," Eric replied, his voice strained. "But this thing, it's not just a tool anymore. I can feel it. It's starting to control me. It's like it knows what I'm afraid of." "Fear," Rachel echoed. "What do you mean?" "I can't explain it," Eric said, his breath quickening. "It's not just reacting to my commands anymore. It's like it's pulling me in, playing on my emotions. If I don't figure this out, if I lose control of it, we'll be lost. All of us." Rachel's mind raced as she took in his words. The weapon was no longer just a superweapon. It had become something more dangerous, something beyond their control. She could hear the fear in Eric's voice, and she knew he was struggling to keep it together. The weapon might be their last hope, but at what cost? "Eric, listen to me," Rachel said firmly. "You're the only one who can control it. We don't have time for hesitation. You have to push through this. Humanity is depending on you." But even as Rachel spoke, the weight of the situation seemed to settle even deeper. The Council was powerful. Their reinforcements would come with overwhelming firepower. And no matter how advanced the human fleet had become, they were still vastly outmatched. If Eric couldn't control the weapon, it could turn against them, or worse, destroy them all. "Commander," Sarah Klein said, breaking into the tense silence. "We've got incoming. 3 Council ships, heading right for us. They're opening fire." The shock of her words broke Eric's focus. His hands shot out to the controls, trying to push the weapon into action. The ship shuddered as the first blast from the Council's fleet struck the human defenses. The shields held, barely, but they wouldn't last long under this kind of assault. Eric's mind was racing. He had never felt so powerless, and yet, paradoxically, so powerful. The weapon responded to him in ways he didn't understand. It was like a living, breathing creature, and his emotions were its fuel. "Eric," Rachel's voice again, urgent, insistent. "We need that weapon now. Activate it." But the weapon wasn't responding as it should. Eric's fingers trembled above the control panel. Something had changed in the energy flowing from the weapon. It was more chaotic, more unpredictable. It felt alive, and he realized with a sinking heart that the weapon was evolving into something entirely different from what they had anticipated. "What's happening?" Rachel demanded. "Why isn't it working?" I don't know," Eric said, panic creeping into his voice. "It's resisting me. It's like it's pushing back, as if it doesn't want to be used. Or maybe it wants more." "More." The word echoed in Eric's mind. The weapon had already taken control of the battle. Now, it was taking control of him. Suddenly, there was a crackling sound on the comms, followed by a garbled voice. Eric's heart skipped a beat as he recognized it. "Steele. Eric Steele. You have no idea what you're dealing with." The voice faded in and out, distorted by the static, but the words were unmistakable. Eric's blood ran cold. That voice, it wasn't just any voice. It was from a previous mission, a previous pilot, someone who had been exposed to the weapon before it was classified as a human asset. The weapon had been more than just a tool. It had been tested, adapted, altered. The realization hit him like a blow to the chest. "Eric, what's going on?" Rachel's voice broke through the haze in his mind. "What did you hear?" Eric's mind was racing. "It's not just a weapon. It's something else. It's been used before, on other worlds. And it's not only responding to me. He stopped, unable to say the words. "It's been trying to communicate with me, to control me." Rachel's face went pale, even through the screen. "We've been using this thing without understanding it," she whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. "We don't know what it really is." Before Eric could respond, the weapon activated of its own accord. The surge of energy ripped through the fleet's defenses. The weapon's power tore into the Council's ships, obliterating them in a series of violent explosions. The human fleet was thrown forward by the shockwaves. And yet, the destruction wasn't enough. The Council's reinforcements were still coming, and the weapon's power, now fully unleashed, wasn't showing any signs of stopping. "Stop it," Rachel shouted, her voice hoarse. Eric, "Shut it down." But the weapon had already taken control of the human fleet. It no longer needed their orders. It wasn't just responding to Eric, it was controlling everything. The feeling of being pulled toward it, toward its dark energy, became overwhelming. The weapon wasn't just fighting, it was consuming. Eric's heart pounded in his chest as he felt himself slipping away, his mind engulfed by the weapon's power. He could feel it growing inside him, this presence, this dark force, feeding on his fears, his weaknesses. The weapon wasn't just a tool, it was a force of nature, and it was beginning to overwhelm him. He didn't know how long he could hold on. "Eric," Rachel's voice was desperate now. "You need to fight it." But the weapon was already far beyond their control, and with every passing second, the line between man and machine began to blur. As Eric stared into the depths of the weapon's energy, he realized that they had underestimated what they were dealing with. The weapon was more than just a tool of war. It was an awakening. And if they couldn't find a way to stop it, the price of this power would be more than any of them could afford. The weapon was alive, and now it was making its own choices. The universe had never seemed so vast, so empty. The hum of the human fleet had gone silent, swallowed by the overwhelming presence of the weapon at its center. For Eric Steele, there was no escaping it anymore. The dark energy of the weapon had consumed his mind, and its power coursed through him with such force that it was hard to tell where he ended and it began. The whispers, the urges, it was as though the weapon was speaking to him, guiding him, but also pushing him, pulling him down a path he wasn't sure he could return from. He stood before the control panel, his hands shaking as he tried to force his will against it. But it was no use. The weapon had taken control of the fleet, its power extending beyond his reach, beyond anyone's. The enemy's ships were scattered, destroyed in a wave of firepower, but there was no relief in that victory. It had come at too high a cost. "Eric, please," Rachel's voice echoed through his comms, strained and desperate. "You have to stop this. We can't control it anymore. We don't know what it's going to do." He could hear the fear in her voice, the tremor that betrayed the calm of a seasoned commander. The weapon was their salvation, and their damnation. He was fighting a battle inside his own mind, but every time he tried to push the weapon back, it pushed harder. It was like trying to hold back an ocean with his hands. I can't," Eric whispered, his voice cracking. The words were heavy, like stones in his throat. "It's too strong. I can feel it inside me, Rachel. It's changing everything. I'm not in control anymore." Rachel's voice came again, softer this time. "You are still the human pilot, Eric. You are still you. Remember who you are." But could he? The weapon had stripped away everything familiar, everything human. It wasn't just a tool of war. It was a force of nature. And now, it was a part of him. How could he fight something that felt like it had always been inside him? How could he resist the pull when it promised such power, such victory? The temptation was overwhelming. In the depths of his mind, a shadowy figure emerged from the darkness of the weapon's energy. It was a reflection of his own fears, his own doubts, taking form in a way that made him question everything. The voice, calm yet eerie, whispered to him, drowning out all reason. "You want to win, don't you? You want to save your people. You want to be the hero." The words echoed inside his skull, and Eric's heart beat faster. The shadowy figure grinned, its smile wide and knowing. "You can end this. You can take control. You can be the ruler of this galaxy, Eric Steele. All you have to do is accept the power. Let it flow through you. Let it shape you." The choice felt like a weight pressing on his chest, suffocating him. The weapon offered him everything: control, victory, a future where humanity would rise to the top of the galaxy. But at what cost? Would he become something less than human? Would he sacrifice everything he fought for, everything he believed in, just to wield the power of the weapon? The voice continued to whisper, pulling at his sanity. You will never be weak again. You will never lose again. It was the greatest temptation he had ever known. It promised power beyond imagination, a future where humanity would never fall, where they would reign supreme. But at the same time, it promised the destruction of everything that made them who they were, their values, their spirit, their soul. Eric, listen to me. Rachel's voice broke through the darkness, like a lifeline thrown into the storm. This is not who you are. You're more than just the weapon. You are a human being. You are not meant to rule, to destroy, to control. You were meant to lead. You were meant to fight for humanity's future, not dominate it. Eric closed his eyes, fighting the pull of the weapon's voice. Rachel's words were like a tether, something to hold on to in the swirling chaos inside his mind. He had to fight. He couldn't let the weapon turn him into something he wasn't. He had to hold on to who he was, who they all were. With a final, desperate effort, he reached for the heart of the weapon's energy, closing his mind off from the whispers. He focused, calling on everything that made him human. The strength, the compassion, the hope. For a moment, the weapon seemed to respond. The whispers quieted, the darkness pulling back. He could feel the weapon fighting against him, but now, for the first time, he felt like he had the upper hand. The darkness, the power, it was still there, but now he was choosing to fight it. He was choosing to use it, rather than let it consume him. Rachel, he gasped, his voice hoarse but filled with determination. I'm going to shut it down. Eric, no. Rachel's voice broke with panic. You can't just shut it down. It's the only chance we have. But Eric didn't hesitate. He knew what had to be done. The weapon had been their salvation, but it had also been their downfall. It was a tool, a dangerous, unpredictable tool, and it couldn't control them any longer. He pressed the final sequence on the control panel, a series of commands that would destabilize the weapon's power. As the energy began to unravel, the ship shook violently, a thunderous roar filling the air. The power of the weapon fought back with an intensity that made Eric's skin burn. He gritted his teeth, pushing through the pain, knowing that this was the only way. No matter what happens, he whispered, we fight for humanity. Not as rulers, but as protectors. The weapon pulsed one last time, a surge of energy that seemed to shake the very fabric of reality. Then, with a final, deafening explosion, the energy collapsed in on itself. The weapon's power was gone. Silence. The human fleet was left floating in the aftermath, battered but alive. The Council's forces had been destroyed, their reinforcements scattered. The galaxy was safe, for now, but the victory felt hollow. Eric stood alone, his hand shaking as the control panel flickered and dimmed. They had won, but at what cost? The weapon was gone, but a part of him knew that this victory, this choice, would haunt him for the rest of his life. The price of power was too high, and now, humanity had to live with the consequences of what they had unleashed. Rachel's voice came through, shaky but filled with relief. We did it, Eric. We survived. We survived, he echoed, staring at the stars. But the victory felt fragile. It felt like they had narrowly escaped something that could have destroyed everything they believed in. In the end, they hadn't just fought for the galaxy. They had fought for their humanity. And that, in itself, was the hardest battle of all.